Welcome to this Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, almost mythological story about the evolution of dramatic storytelling in the historical realm of Lendaria. And look, this isn't just some dry history of stages and scripts, okay? It is a gripping, atmospheric epic about the collision between absolute power and untamed art. We're going to explore this through three distinct parables, tracing exactly how state-mandated order accidentally gave birth to unmatched artistic sophistication.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Our story begins with the king of Londaria. Now, the king ruled from a royal palace defined by its heavily controlled light. Everything was rigid, ordered, pristine. But just beyond those palace walls, the king watched as his own shadow grew long and unruly. This shadow whispered of the messy, episodic reality of the bear pits and the taverns. The king absolutely despised this chaos, but the people actually lived in it.
Imagine the massive tension here. On one hand, you have the palace, bathed in this controlled light and absolute, rigid order. And pushing right back against it, you have the bear pits and the taverns, defined by messy reality and fluid chaos. It was literally a divided kingdom. The state demanded obedience, but the unruly energy of the common people, well, that couldn't just be erased by a royal decree. The shadow was out there, wandering the roads like a vagrant, just waiting for someone daring enough to speak to it.
Act 1. The Scholar's Ink and the Shadow's Blood.
So, leaving the pristine marble of the palace behind, a highly dangerous bargain was about to be struck out in the damp mud of the city's outskirts. To capture the raw darkness of the city, a scholar named Christopher stepped forward. He was a really prominent voice among a group known as the University Wits. Now, these wits were men of refined, high learning, but Christopher didn't seek the king's gold or favor. Instead, he ventured into the literal and metaphorical mud to make a pact with the shadow itself.
And the pact they struck was beautifully twisted. Christopher promised to give the unruly shadow a silver tongue. Specifically, he meant the rhythmic, refined beauty or blank verse. In exchange for this elevated voice, the shadow agreed to yield its dark, untamed energy right to Christopher's pen. It was the perfect marriage of raw, chaotic emotion and highly disciplined artistic structure.
From this dark union of scholar and shadow, a masterpiece was born. The play, Dr. Faustus. This became the definitive example of overreaching ambition. The vagrant shadow was no longer just a rumor spreading in the taverns. It was now permanently bound into a compelling story that dared to challenge the stars themselves. It even questioned the divine right of monarchs. Christopher Marlowe basically proved that the most dangerous human truths could be refined into a highly sophisticated art form.
Act 2. The Master's Cage and the Circular Song.
Now, as you can probably guess, the king was not exactly thrilled with this development. The crown became completely obsessed with controlling this dangerous, fiery new art form. Believing this newly voiced shadow needed to be caged, the king appointed the Master of Revels. This figure acted as a cold, bureaucratic enforcer. His one job was to use strict laws to bind these unruly spirits that dared to mirror the chaos of the night. But here's the thing. The Master of Revels was rigid, and art is fluid. Despite the king's harsh decrees, the shadow remained. It kept flickering in the torchlight, openly mocking the king's controlled light. The laws just weren't enough.
Realizing he couldn't actually destroy the shadow, the king decided to contain it. He used stage architecture as a literal metaphor for social control. He built a great circular structure. It was constructed of heavy stone and timber, deliberately inspired by the blood-stained pits of the commoners, and strategically placed out in the wilderness just beyond the city walls. He had basically built a magnificent cage to quarantine the chaos.
But inside that cage, absolute magic happened. Marlowe and his scholarly kin took this enclosed space and poured the fire of high learning directly into the rowdy pits. The Master of Revels stood guard at the door, thinking he had finally won. But inside that wooden O, the shadow was singing. It sang in a refined, blank verse that echoed like thunder through the galleries, totally thrilling the masses.
So the crucial point here is the sheer irony of the king's plan. The circular cage didn't destroy the shadow at all, did it? It gave it a permanent home. But the king also realized something profound. By giving the shadow this circular arena, the unruly energy of his people was no longer a genuine threat of street rebellion. Instead, the theater became a vessel for order. It was a place where the masses could safely purge their darker impulses through the thunderous poetry of the stage.
Act 3. The Mirror and the Upstart's Shadow.
Fast forward a bit, and as the years passed, the king grew weary, and honestly, paranoid. Despite the cage he built, he began to deeply fear that the fiery ambition constantly depicted in the playhouses would eventually spill out and consume his throne. The stage had become far more than a simple distraction. It had become a sophisticated mirror. When the king looked into it, he didn't just see overreaching ambition anymore. He saw complex characters who actively dared to question his very right to rule. The artistic evolution was happening way too fast, and the king prepared to tear the wooden structures down once and for all.
But right then, literally just as the axes were being sharpened, the shadow brought forth a new figure to save the stage. Enter the upstart playwright. This was a young man who had spent his youth quietly studying the brilliant artistic foundation laid by Marlowe and the rest of the university wits. He totally understood the power of the silver tongue, but he knew how to use it quite differently.
And this brilliantly illustrates the true turning point of our epic. While the university wits perfectly capture the shadow's overreaching ambition, its intense desire to conquer the stars, this upstart evolved that foundation. He showed the weary king that he could actually capture the shadow's humanity. He wasn't just writing about rebellious titans, he was writing about the hearts of everyday people, kings and fools alike.
This upstart, of course, was William Shakespeare. Through Shakespeare's absolutely unparalleled poetry, the king finally understood that he could allow the shadow to rule the stage safely. Shakespeare balanced the king's desire for order and light with the deeply human, relatable stories of those who stood side by side down in the muddy pit.
Epilogue: The Truth in the Pit.
So, what does this all mean for us? Well, this entire explainer is really a masterclass on why we crave the dark alongside the light. The legacy of this theatrical epic is that the stage was never truly a mirror meant for political rebellion. Rather, it's a reflection of the messy, beautiful, and sometimes downright dangerous truth of the human condition. The scholar, the cage, the upstart, they literally all work together to give our collective shadow a silver tongue, allowing us to confront our deepest fears and desires safely within the bounds of art.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty massive question to ponder. When you consume modern storytelling today, is your entertainment a sophisticated mirror, genuinely reflecting your complex humanity? Or is it just a circular cage built to distract your shadow? Think about that the next time the lights go down. Thanks for exploring this epic with us.